Well, ma'am, the only way to open the doors and get out of this here car is if you kick me. But please don't kick me.
1-1. What the hell were you thinking when you made this train car? You morally deprived, absolute madbot! That was my strongest thought at the end of the episode, but let's rewind and take things from the top. This episode starts where the previous ended, with the Flex appearing out of the water because Lake gazed into a lake. And then the mirror police have to do this silly little jumping routine to chase her to the shoreline. I originally wondered why Mace and Sieve didn't just exit closer to the shore on the first warp, but I guess the water's surface isn't uniform enough for the reflective portions to be considered a singular object, and at no point in the series have Agent Mace or Sieve demonstrated the ability to traverse between separate objects without Lake's reflection present. Thus, they're forced to exit from the same reflective area they entered, which leads to this hopping form of locomotion. It's a rather interesting ability because of the limitations placed on it. The Flex agents are not free to teleport anywhere in the real world, they can only intercept their target sliver. If I had to theorize on these mirror mechanics, I would guess that there's a complex interdimensional labyrinth that links the Prime World and the Mirror World at every point that a reflective surface exists. To traverse across these boundaries without getting lost, the Mirror Police are somehow able to sync themselves to their target sliver in a similar manner to how a mirror entity is synced to their Prime counterpart. But that's just me spitballing ideas off the top of my head. Obviously, the limitations of their warping can simply be arbitrarily constructed caveats to make things more interesting by actually allowing Lake a chance of escape. After all, we had this scene right here.
But your body's reflective. Can't they jump out of you?
Ow! People can't jump out of people. Come on, that's stupid.
Oh yeah, that's stupid, but the rest of it is normal.
I actually have this idea that the Flex can't jump out of objects originating from the mirror world, which I'll talk about more in a review of a later episode, but they also definitely can't jump out of people, as eyeballs have reflections. So if they could jump out of people, Lake would be in trouble anytime somebody is merely looking at her. For Lake to actually have moments away from the Flex, some relatively arbitrary constraints on their powers are needed to make the story unfold as envisioned. Which I'm totally fine with, because from my memory, I'm pretty sure these established rules stay consistent throughout the whole season, and for me that's what matters the most, consistency when it comes to fantasy powers, rather than if they're based on some form of logic. So, speaking of the Flex agents, it was fun to see Agent Sieve take the lead and attempt the good cop routine to try and muddy Jesse's trust of Lake, since up to this point, Sieve has always been following Agent Mace's lead. I also appreciated how Mace silently stands back and lets Sieve try to do his thing, implying that there's a sense of trust between the two despite how often Mace has appeared to be dismissive of Sieve's behavior. It's still table scraps when it comes to characterization, but I'll take whatever I can get, because a somewhat one-sided buddy-buddy dynamic on the villain's side is just kind of fun. When Agent Mace hears the kids arguing and realizes that even if Sieve's approach was to work, it would still take quite some time, he departs to prepare Plan B. And I really dig Sieve's approving nod and smile. Little touches like these sprinkled in throughout the season also really help sell it when Sieve is furious and wants to avenge his partner when the series gets to its finale. There's another instance of this low-key bonding at the end of this episode, where Mace is exhausted by the constant failure, but Sieve provides emotional support.
Joe. We'll get her, buddy.
Okay, so the Toad. The hilarious and tragic Toad.
Oh, thank you very much.
I love his goofy, Elvis-esque voice. It does a lot to add to the already existing humor of a somewhat socially awkward Toad begging you not to kick it. Implementing the Toad into Jesse's and Lake's ongoing argument was also done seamlessly, and the Toad becomes another bouncing off point for their already existing problems. Lake becomes exasperated and takes the cold hands-off approach, and Jesse can't commit to kicking the Toad, so the two end up sitting in passive-aggressive silence on opposite sides of the train car. The scene where Alan Dracula turns into a bunch of pillows cracked me up, because Lake was so darn intent on continuing her and Jesse's silent conflict from afar. Look at her, she's like, "Don't you dare approach the deer, we're just gonna keep sitting here, being mad at each other." But Jesse decides to move forward, both literally and figuratively, which leaves Lake shocked. She's doing like the shocked Pikachu expression, and then she grumbles about having to follow Jesse's lead, lest she feel one-upped, and without pillows. I just get a kick out of certain moments when Lake acts vindictive and petty, especially this one. It wouldn't be pleasant behavior to deal with in real life, but it has this immature charm to it from a viewer perspective. Makes me want to, give her a noogie, you know? Before I talk about what I consider to be the focal point of the episode, the video with Jesse's brother, I do want to mention the Randall cameo. Seems like between the family tree car and the map car, our group visited the beach car, where Lake unfortunately did not find Randall amusing. What a shame. So, I'm all for doing stupid, physical, jackass-styled activities that could potentially get you hurt because it's amusing and funny. But you can't coerce people to do that sort of thing! You gotta make your own choice to be stupid. This crew Jesse hangs out with tried to apply peer pressure via toxic masculinity in order to bully a younger kid under the guise of hazing. So hazing is just a fucked up concept in general, but it's a shitty ritualistic thing certain groups do to initiate people into the group. Jesse's so-called friends don't have any plans to hang out with his little brother or accept him into their group. They just want to see a little kid get hurt because they're shitbags. So they're pretending to do a messed up practice in order to accomplish something even worse. It's an inception of mean-spirited fuckery going on over here. Jesse not only allowed for his brother to be a victim of bullying, but he helped facilitate the entire process. Jesse wasn't even a passive observer, he was an active participant goading Nate on, despite Nate's attempt to back out. Nate would have not ended up careening down the hill without Jesse's active involvement. The more you analyze the video, the worse it gets. Nate doesn't actually show any indication of caring about Jesse's friends or wanting to be around them, nor does he show any desire to be seen as a man. Nate just wants to hang out with his older brother. Look at this moment.
I don't know. If I do it, can I hang out with you?
Nate is looking directly at Jesse, and he says you specifically, not all of you. Nate only wants to be part of this group so he can be by his brother's side more often. That's the sole motivation he has for doing this. Jesse doesn't even realize this. He thinks his brother buys into the notions of toxic masculinity.
Yeah, it's fine. Just do it already, Nate. If you don't do it, you can't be a man.
Jesse also doesn't realize that he betrayed his brother's trust because he got too swept up in acting like a douche canoe that his buddies could be proud of.
Jesse, tell him he failed. Nate, you failed the man test.
And rather than being concerned about his brother's feelings or potential injuries, what did Jesse care about in this moment?
You better not tell Mom.
Jesse was worried that he might get into trouble with his parents. I love this development. I think it's safe to say that most people in their lives have at some point, or multiple times, done things that they are not proud of and extremely regret. And it takes a lot of sincerity to show a genuinely kind-hearted and likable character do something extremely shitty because of a lapse in judgment or the sway of the community he hangs around. This moment hit pretty hard because up until this point, Jesse seemed like a fairly well-adjusted person, all things considered. His number wasn't that high, and the character flaws we've seen up to this point seem to be negatively impacting him. So it's kind of a wake-up call to realize that trying to please people can harm others around you. Jesse is in straight-up denial about the severity of what he did to his brother, which makes sense because he cannot see himself as this mean-spirited of a person.
No, I didn't. It's more complicated than that.
And I'm sure he replays this video constantly because he'll think maybe this time it won't appear as bad as I remember. But no, deep inside Jesse knows how bad what he did is, and he's having a hard time recontextualizing that with the sort of person he perceives himself to be. Speaking of all this, I also love how we will never know whether Jesse would have chosen to fuck the police, or if he would have become a narc. I want to believe that Jesse would not have sold Lake out, but Lake makes a good point.
I wasn't gonna let them in.
Why should I trust somebody who sells out his own brother?
In the heat of the moment, Jesse can do things that are very uncharacteristic of him. For example, he went whole hog on that whole toxic masculinity angle when he was trying to goad Nate.
If you don't do it, you can't be a man.
And Jesse does not come across as somebody who holds traditional masculinity values in high regard. Like Jesse speaks of empathy, he's highly theatrical.
And please, no, I don't blame you. Maybe this was fate. Fated to be a tree boy. Ow!
He does not come across like the stereotypical douche bro, and yet he was parroting the bullshit his friends were saying. So who's to say whether Jesse would have gotten swept up in what Agent Sieve was trying to sell? By the way, I absolutely love the smug face that Sieve makes, and I love his dialogue delivery when he has to lie as his partner is showing up with the lawbreaker.
If she means that much to you, Jesse, I suppose we can make an exception.
That waver, that tremble in his voice as honesty has to be swept aside for duty. Chef's kiss. Mwah. So, I've given Lake a good amount of flack for acting juvenile, but she does something really mature toward the end of this episode. After confronting Jesse about the sort of company he keeps...
Your friends are bad. You know that, right?
Maybe.
She sees just how conflicted and confused he is inside, and she sheds any hang-ups or pettiness that she had up to this point, and decides to just be honest with Jesse. To help Jesse overcome his denial, she allows herself to be vulnerable, and she shares her backstory. That's a very profound and emotionally intelligent move that kind of took my breath away, honestly. These delicate, somber moments when people are being open with each other, they tug at my heart. Everything else that happens to conclude the episode after Lake and Jesse have this heart-to-heart kind of feels like a well-deserved victory lap. Through some lucky circumstance, neither of them had to kick the toad, although it wasn't so lucky for the toad, but the toad got saved by Jesse taking some initiative and holding the flex back at the same time. As for the final scene where Jesse hugs Lake, I'm just gonna play the clip, because it speaks for itself.
Thank you!
And 1-1, the inner machinations of your mind are a chaotic enigma.
Thank you kindly for saving me from an existentially nightmarish existence. I won't soon forget it. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching my review, and an extra special thanks to those people who support my video-making ventures on Patreon. Season 3 of Infinity Train has been announced to premiere sometime this summer. It will be on HBO Max, just like Adventure Time Distant Lands. I'm very excited that this awesome show will get to continue, and I'll be trying my hardest to finish the Season 2 reviews before Season 3 comes out. Oh, and before I go, to those watching this review on the day that it was uploaded, later today I'm planning to stream on Twitch for the first time in a while. So follow me over on Twitch if you'd like to tune in and hang out. Catch y'all on the flip.